There's no such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism.
The Hollow Age merges history, myth, and environmental realism. How did you approach turning an abstract philosophical idea into a world readers could feel and see and understand and grasp?
I have a background in archaeology, so I always enjoy writing a story where I can bring in some of that perspective. The Earth is also turning into a very different place that we might not survive.
How do we tell the difference between real progress and sustainability theater from your perspective?
It's sort of easy for politicians to make a lot of these promises and then they don't end up getting kept. It's also easy to pass the blame. If you are someone who wants to do something like a recycling initiative, it's not just enough to have the idea, right? You have to also follow through.
Today's episode is particularly special. I'm joined by Claire Bartlett, an award-winning author whose storytelling blends environmental awareness, history, and activism with imagination and truth. Claire is also my co-author on The Hollow Age, a book born from a Compassiviste vision to reflect our world's moral fractures and possibilities for renewal. Welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues. I'm your host, Ali Horiat. My goal in this program is to educate our audience about various global issues and how we can help. Today's episode is particularly special. I'm joined by Claire Bartlett, an award-winning author whose storytelling blends environmental awareness, history, and activism with imagination and truth. Claire is also my co-author on The Hollow Age, a book born from a Compassiviste vision to reflect our world's moral fractures and possibilities for renewal. While the book, The Hollow Age, began with a question I still ask myself, it became a living narrative through Claire's extraordinary writing and world building. Together, we wanted to create this story, but more so, a mirror, one that asks, what happens when civilization itself becomes unsustainable and humanity must confront the systems that led us here? So, hello, Claire, and welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. The Hollow Age merges history, myth, and environmental realism. What drew you most to the story when we began this project, and how did you approach turning an abstract philosophical idea into a world readers could feel and see and understand and grasp?
Yeah, I think what drew me most to it was this combination of past and future that we work with a lot in the Hollow Age, right? So at first we were discussing, of course, the main character, Olivia. She was always this archaeologist, finding evidence that, the Earth was once a very different place, maybe than she thought. And the idea that, the Earth is also turning into a very different place that we might not survive was very compelling in this sense. We had this very cool dichotomy going on when we started talking about this, right? So that was very cool. I have a background in archaeology, so I always enjoy writing a story where I can bring in some of that perspective. And so that was good fun. As for turning the abstract philosophical ideas into a world, I think you get a lot of credit for that, right?
Okay.
We had a lot of fun sort of philosophies that we could talk about and bring in when we were putting this story together. And while I have a lot of practical experience with making a story structure, right? What makes a story really good are the like is the philosophical themes, right? It is the way that the story can explore something and ask questions, especially when we're looking at a sci-fi story like the Hollow Age. So mostly, I think I looked at what story structure, and then we talked about philosophy. And it was
Mhm.
fun to take different philosophical ideas and put them in different scenes so that we got the chance to explore all of these different things.
It was really your work that did that because though I can write and I can, as you say, philosophize, I can't put it in character and I can't put it in the kind of plot and the excitement that you did. So it was really great to collaborate on this in the sense that, like you said, you brought in the educational background, the experiential background, and it went from a thought that I was pondering, like, could it be, such and such, all the way to a reality that you created. So that was really cool. Now, much of your work critiques greenwashing. Aside from the Hollow Age and everything, it's something that it's deeply embedded in you. How it's all about how countries and corporations claim to protect the planet while perpetuating harm. From personal experiences like Copenhagen, for example, where you are now and where I see a flag right behind you of Denmark.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Danish flag, yeah.
How do uh, how do we tell the difference between real progress and sustainability theater from your perspective? What do you
Yeah.
look for, and what do you tell people to look for?
Yeah, that's a very hard question, right? Because one of the things that is important in sustainability or in any kind of progress is that it does take time. And so it's sort of easy for politicians or people who want to be leaders to make a lot of these promises and then they don't end up getting kept. And it's also easy to pass the blame, right? Because it's a very complicated issue. And so if you are someone who wants to do something like a recycling initiative or things like that, it's not just enough to have the idea, right? You have to also follow through. And
Mhm.
so real progress often looks like the way people ally themselves, right, with different groups. And in that way, it can be very political, right? In Denmark, we have loads of different political parties. And so they usually make, coalitions together to get things done on both the local and the national level. And so looking at who's in power
Mhm.
versus what they have promised to do can have a big impact. It's also a matter of like asking questions. Asking questions is always good. You want to be curious, but when someone says that they can do so many things, right? Like put up loads of new wind farms or change the rules around sustainable farming, right? Asking questions like how is
Mhm.
very important, right? At the in the best possible situation, you're going to learn something, but it also you want to know that these people's grand ideas are going to come through.
Right, that they're feasible.
Yeah, like right now, we just had a local election for the municipal governments around
Mhm.
Denmark, and there were a couple of different parties who wanted to like reduce public transportation fees or even eliminate them. And that's a
Mm.
great idea, but I also wanted to know how, right? How will they do it? How feasible is that, right? And those that can help answer some of the questions about like what will we do to help?
Mhm. Okay, I like this perspective. I'm gonna um, take it here for a minute.
Hmm.
What you're saying is not just the traditional, do the right thing, make the right choices, watch your overconsumption and everything we're hearing, but you're also saying when we have these grandiose, lovely ideas, let's make sure that they're not just ideas and theory, and essentially something that we can put into practice, which
Yeah.
ironically is something I say too, because I always say, academia is great. You'll get the best theories and you'll get the best books with solutions to solve every issue in the world, but none of these people ever do actually solve the problems of the world, because theories stop at theories. They stop, between the
Yeah.
two covers of the book that they're written
Yeah.
in. And the real world is very different. So how do you tackle that? How do you do it? How do you fix it? Um, and that's a really smart way of answering this, because it takes you to a place of, yes, we know this is good and that is bad, and but how do we get there? How do we do it? Because on the one hand, a, a nation may come and say, we're going to make public transport free. Well, this is the issue that I keep pushing back on with Finland, your neighbors, because
Hmm.
um, they always are touted in the news for like, oh, Finland solved its homelessness problem. And I say, Finland has 5 million people in it, and it has the wealth to be able to do that. And to start with, the homelessness problem was small. Take this issue to India, take the Finland, party that resolved the homelessness issue, place them in India for me, and let them do the same. And let me see how long it'll take
Yeah.
for them to do it. It'll be impossible. It's not replicable.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
same thing in Denmark. You make public transport free. The climate issue is not a Denmark issue. It's a global issue. How are you going to make public transport free in all of the world so that this actually makes a difference? Because Denmark's public transportation is less than 1% of the global emissions problem. So it's not a
For
solution.
sure.
Even if
Yeah.
it's implemented,
Yeah.
right, it requires a grander scale of implementation. So if this becomes a pilot for the EU, for example, and then the entire EU turns around and says, okay, and then all of Europe says, okay, let's replicate that, and then this transitions over to North America and South America and other parts of the world, great. But then we also have to
Yeah.
remember, that it's not going to happen. So
No. Yeah. And
this is
every
this is where the
country,
intelligence
right?
of
Yeah.
your protest here is. The intelligence of it is basically that it's beautiful for elections, it's beautiful for votes. You're going to capture a lot of people, but where is it going?
Yeah, exactly. And especially when you're looking at public officials or people who want something in exchange for these promises they're going to make to
Hmm.
you, money or votes or whatever. Um, the real proof you get it when it happens or doesn't happen, right? A lot of politics is a dream, right, that they're
Hmm.
selling of how great the world is going to be if we have the power. And so that's also why it can take a long time, right? Because you also have to see how do they actually act when they have power?
Hmm.
And no one has all of the power, and that's a good thing, right?
Right.
So how do they act when they have some of the power and they have to negotiate and so on? And that's something that I think in Denmark, at least, you can get a pretty clear view of how it progresses because we have so many different political parties fighting. It's a little more difficult
Mm.
in places where you have one or two parties that have all the power sort of condensed, right? But it's also for sure um, solving the global problem of climate change can feel overwhelming to the common man, of course. Um, so being able to look at what's happening close to home is a great thing. And also exactly because Denmark has a small population, so it's also making public transportation free for everyone in Denmark is not the same as making it free for everyone in India, right? Or in the United States, or in
Right.
even in like Great Britain or France, which have still
Hmm.
much larger populations, right? Um, so but one hopes that these can be things like pilot programs, and then
Right.
people can look at it and say, okay, so this is what they did in Denmark to help out. How does that how does that translate? Right?
Hmm.
What can we do and what doesn't work for these different things?
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I always say, like, a lot of the smaller countries, because of the smaller size of the population, it's a lot easier to get people on board of a program, or to manage a program with realistic funding. If you take a place like Malta, for example, and you want to start something new, it's easy. It's not that hard because
Hmm.
it's feasible. It's always feasible economically. It's hardly ever not economically feasible. But then, does that scale replicate in Brazil? And what's the point of all the science and the investment if the scale doesn't replicate and it only stays within that small context, right? And sometimes it's also, like you said, the diversity of the politics, because as much as, for example, if you take the United States, they have their state level politics, they have their city level politics, and then they have their federal, national level politics, and there's there are layers to the politics. But when it comes down to a national kind of blanketing idea, it's really hard to implement. It's much more
Yeah.
easier to do it, in those small collectives. But um, then you can replicate what happened in Malta, for example, in the city of Los Angeles, for example, because
Hmm.
it's like, okay, this is the same. We can replicate it here. But then would they do that, and would that go to, say, Dallas, for example? No. And so
Yeah.
again, it's the same thing. So it's very much a realism problem of can it be implemented in that way. And I sometimes think it may be better to have the politicians prove themselves before elections versus promise and
Yeah.
then get elected and then have to prove that promise. It's kind of like I promise I can do this. Okay, it's yours. Here's the money
Yeah.
and here's everything. And if you don't do it, there's no punishment whatsoever. We'll just say you weren't good and
Yeah.
we won't elect you for the next term. That's the worst that can happen to you, right? Versus
Yeah.
any other job, you have to do the work first. You go to a doctor and they would have to, you broken leg, you go to a doctor, they'd have to put it in a cast and fix it and everything before, they're off the hook essentially.
Yeah.
They mess up your leg and they're not off the hook. They got problems. They may lose their license. Many things may happen, but not a politician. So continuing on that same
Yeah.
stream, the book also reflects the West's disproportionate impact on the global South. Um, with things like cheap labor, fast fashion, extractive economics. How do you see storytelling as a way to make people confront these hidden costs? How do you showcase that in your writing?
Yeah. Well, I hope I do. I hope it comes out across. I
It
think a
does
big
come out.
thing that is good. Yeah. I think a big thing is putting it in their face, right?
Mm,
It's very easy in the day to ignore all the things we don't like. I can fill up my day so easily with doing my work at my desk, right? Going shopping for my groceries, picking up my kid. And then, because I can go online, right? And even when I'm trying to buy from a Danish or EU site, um, I have no idea where the things I buy are made, right?
hmm
And
hmm
there are tons of sites that are like in Danish, translated into Danish. I think I'm buying locally, but really they've just they have some drop shipping company somewhere else, right? Um, and a big part of that is like first making sure that people can't avoid it, right? Putting it in directly in as a problem, as a philosophy to
hmm
explore in a book like this. It also you're not going to get that same feeling of shame as if somebody actually went up to you and confronted you about it, saying, why do you do this? And so on. Because, of course, it's filtered through these characters who are maybe having the same complicated feelings that
hmm
your average person will have, where they don't think it's a great idea to buy fast fashion, but they're too poor to avoid slow fashion or to buy slow fashion, or they, are busy and distractible, and, or, it's so convenient, and they don't really want to think about the extra, like the things that their convenience costs other people. So being able to bring that into a character space so people can relate to the character, but they're still removed. I think that's a great way to have people look at it from a less emotional angle, right? And then, of course, hopefully presenting some kind of solution. Sometimes that's possible, and sometimes that's not possible, depending on what we're looking at. But a lot of times, I know for myself, a lot of times I'm looking for a solution to something, like, where do I buy my ebook if not from Amazon? And so when someone provides you with the solution, that's great, right? There are a lot of people who are ready to jump on a solution once they get it.
But the word solution is tricky because you touched on ebook and books and Amazon, right? Amazon is a monopoly in book sales. It really not in the sense of, price and all of that kind of monopoly, in the sense that it is the marketplace for books. So, more than 96% of books are sold through Amazon and all of that. Like, there really isn't a market. So everybody's going to Amazon. It's unavoidable. A solution can be to purchase the book, the ebook, for example, from another site or from the author's sites themselves. Like, you have an author site, or Compassiviste Publishing has a site. You can go there and buy it, right? But when 96% or, almost 100%, let's just say almost 100% of books are sold through Amazon, it's not realistic to be able to grab that population through a marketing campaign, especially for a singular author who may not even have $5 million to match Amazon's daily campaigns,
Yeah.
right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think it's also a two-way street, in the sense that a lot of authors today, if they're self-publishing, then they don't have the luxury of saying, I'm going to be fully ethical and not print, not just for the paper issue and the logistics and the bookstores. It's not just, I'm printing on FSC paper. That's great. But what about the store and the energy that it's using and the staff that have to drive in or out, or even take public transport? The fact that it's public transport doesn't mean that we abuse it, or use it 50 times a day, right? Like, people don't get that, even with any kind of overusage. So there are all these things involved with the paper book. And then on top of all of this, there is, like you said, we don't know where the book was made. So more likely it's going to be made in the global south, in a country where there's lax laws and some child is binding the book. And so as an author, you filter all of this out because you need to have your paperback in Amazon, and you need to buy into some of their systems, or algorithmic pays and everything, so that you can sell a book and pay your rent. If you're published through, a traditional publisher, then you look at the big five, and the big five, again, are the Amazon of the publishing world, basically. Everything else besides them is really negligible, in a sense. That's the market share that they have combined. So you go there, and they're not budging. They don't care. So between these, in the cracks, What are you going to do? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. So really, there isn't a solution, because the solution only happens when the entire mass of the consumer base and the entire mass of the supply base, which are the authors who are writing, come together and say, we're not doing this anymore. On this side, we're not buying a single book. I don't want to get educated, because I'd rather stay alive than go extinct smart. Because the alternatives are, I'm very smart, but my species is extinct. Or I'm not that smart, but my species is alive,
still going on,
right?
yeah.
It's still going on. So between these two alternatives, I'm going to pick the smarter one and stay alive. So I'm not reading anymore. And the authors on the other side say, well, we're not writing anymore, because same reason. I'd rather not write and stay alive than write and die. But that's a solution, but we're not there, because capitalism forces upon us, I need to pay my rent, so I will write, let the other author be the ethical one. and
Yeah.
everybody still
Yeah.
prints. As you know, they'll make the most ethical decisions in their personal lives, but then 9 out of 10 authors print. They will provide
Yeah.
the ebook as well, and they will, to me, this is part of the greenwashing. They will say, I prefer that you buy the ebook,
Hmm.
but I provide the paperback because I still want to make money before and beyond any other, um, you know,
Yeah.
ethical ruling that I have. I will provide the
Yeah.
bad. I won't say no to it. So the solutions to me are mindset issues. They are ethical issues. It's really that are forced upon us through capitalism and through staying alive by the condition of
Yeah.
money. Because that's the only condition you
And
stay alive with unless
there is that philosophy, right, that there's no such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism. And it's for
exactly.
exactly the way you say. And I mean, I've been investigating the let's call it the hybrid author space for a while,
Right.
where authors are investigating many different ways to get published through the big five publishers, through self-publishing, through small press publishing, and even through like subscription or Patreon
Mhm.
publishing. And there are some great ways, I think, that authors are pushing back, especially against the big five. I would say less in terms of stuff like climate change, but more in terms of stuff like good working conditions for authors.
Mhm.
Um, but on the other hand, like, yeah, all your choices are going to hurt someone, right? Um, if you publish online and have a Patreon, like who owns Patreon, right? All of these huge tech companies still own the websites that
Yeah.
you have,
And
right?
the money
So no
and the
matter
money you're
what,
putting in there is going to end
yeah,
up in a
exactly,
yacht that is using diesel.
yeah,
So at the end of the day, you're really, no matter, like you say, no matter which direction you go into, it is not supportive unless this is why Compassiviste calls on the revolution, because through reform we can't fix things, because the Reformation is owned by the same people. Like you said,
yeah,
who, like, you'll say, you know what, I'm only putting my book on a Google Drive and I'm going to trust that people pay into this account every time they download it from, or they go on Google Drive and download my book. Okay, that's lovely. You're the best person in the world, right? And people are going to be ethical and they're going to pay you. That's also lovely. And I'm only banking with a green bank that, I'm not going to HSBC and the money's not going to be there. So all of this is great. But Google, what are they doing with the money? Right? What are they doing with all the money that you're bringing through Google by putting your book there? Well, it's another disaster. So what do we need? We need a whole systems revolution. How do we create a systems revolution? We can't. We can, it's not even an option anymore. We almost can't, because we're in a position that to do that you need a monster-sized collective to really come
yeah,
together, especially in the north, right? Because that's where those decisions get made. I think at this
yeah,
point, the global south is in such desperation mode that it's helping by not adding to the problem of the climate issues and stuff, but it's not in a place that the people there can rightfully start the changes. So
yeah,
it's a tough place. It's a
yeah.
tough place.
And I think
Um,
maybe probably the biggest part of it is, maybe the best thing is to make sure we're taking care of each other where we are, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed by all of these things, right? And the problem that we have to live, but we also are trying to live in the best possible way. And so being able to, be reliable for our neighbors and have people we can work together with is, I think, going to be the future.
Okay. You take care of your neighbors, you help your neighbors, and
Yeah.
you help yourself. And in the commune that you live in, you're trying your best. One nation south of you, people are not that neighborly and friendly, just assuming, right? I'm just giving you an example. Say wherever you live, one nation south of you is a huge nation, like say you border Germany. And it's a big country. And let's just say the Germans are saying, no, let's just, go wild.
Yeah.
What is going to happen to your commune is you're going to get flooded
Yeah.
and you're going
Then
to
you have a whole lot of
cease
new
to exist.
neighbors to take care of.
Yeah, you have a whole lot of new neighbors to take care
Yeah.
of, and eventually you won't be able to, and eventually you will perish with all of the neighbors that you love and you have compassion for, and you'll all sink together. So, again, I come from a very, very
Well,
dangerous, realistic
yeah.
perspective that says that's not enough anymore. Because there are pockets doing this. I mean, there are pockets of cities that I see traveling and everything that are really trying to do this. I was in Germany, and they have I remember there were this cluster of homes where in the middle of the kind of subdivision, so to speak, was land for a home. And what they had done is instead of building that one, all of the other neighbors pitched into the builder to make this a garden. And so they had vegetation there, like it was a couple of acres and all, and they had their own vegetation. And it was a commune. So they would go in and pick the fruits that they needed and come out. And, they just took care of it together. They paid for it together and whatnot. Lovely, beautiful, for a rainy day, you have food and everything else, and you have your homes and all of that. But when the flood comes, or when the earthquake comes, or when any of those, human pushed kind of disasters that shouldn't have happened at this rate or at this point happen, um, what is that going to do? What is that commune going to do? What is that compassion going to do? Really, it's still going to starve everybody. So it is an earth issue. It's not a national issue. Like civil war is a national issue sometimes, most of the time,
Yeah.
but like something like COVID was not a national issue.
No, it
You
was a
couldn't, you
huge issue.
couldn't,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a
It
global
was a
issue.
worldwide global
Right.
issue
And so
for
we
sure.
had worldwide rules and regulations that applied, right? I mean, even through travel, even through borders, the border of France and Germany couldn't have a different ruling as the border of
Yeah.
Germany and Poland, right? Like it was standardized. So we had standardized solutions to contain this problem. So in that sense, I feel like sometimes when people say act locally and all of that kind of stuff, it's great if it's a local issue or if it's an issue that can be localized. But climate change is not a local issue.
No, it's not. But so
So I understand where you come
I have a
from. The
strong like
overwhelm.
philosophy of world unity,
Right.
right, and of a strong desire for world unity and cooperation.
Mhm.
But I think sometimes from a practical standpoint, right, we have to look at what we're capable of doing. Um, there is some stuff I can do that affects someone far away, like
Mhm.
deciding I'm not going to buy my clothes from a fast fashion company. And there's some stuff that I have very little power over. For example, Denmark has been very affected actually by some policy changes in the United States because a lot of green energy programs got canceled. And Denmark has a bunch of companies that were working on that. And so that affected a lot of people, but there's not a lot of influence to be had over that on that sort of level. So I do believe for sure that like we can do things to keep our spirits up, practically speaking. And I think that behavioral, like having strong behavioral, like positive reinforcement can also be very good. I was actually reminded of this study that some anthropologists did with, I think it was chimpanzees, right? They had some male chimpanzees that were raised in like mostly female groups, right? And they were raised in a very different manner when they had only female role models. And it also got to the point where sometimes they would like these males would come from mostly male groups and be in these transfer to these mostly female groups, and those male chimpanzees, they had to learn to get with the ladies program or they would be kicked out. And I thought that was really interesting, because so you can, when you have this dispersal
Mhm.
of a group, they will assimilate with the group they join. or have a harder time. And sometimes the assimilation is bad and sometimes the assimilation is good. So definitely, I think part of the local work is making sure the assimilation is positive.
That's a very dangerous thing you just said because I can think of eugenics,
For sure. Yes.
right? And then
That's
I can
why you
think
have to.
of, yes, I can think of so many ways of this, assimilation that would generally go wrong before it goes right. And even in the counter, because if you notice immigration, take the United States again, large immigrant population. In almost every major city, you have a Chinatown, you have a Koreatown, you have little this, little that, little Italy, all sorts of things. And the reason for these spaces is because people wanted to withhold their own cultures, ways, systems, and all of that, right? And so
Yeah.
they weren't willing to become a new nation. They were willing to bring their culture in the better way that they wanted it to be into the new country. So the Italian was building Italy in the way that they prefer it to be migrating from Italy.
Yeah.
The person in China was coming over for a better China as opposed to where they were living. And so everybody's recreating their country in the new country. And I think this is part of the European problem right now, where there's a flood of people coming from Africa and they're coming in there and there's a clash of cultures, and everybody wants to defend, so to speak, their culture. And when you defend your culture from one perspective, you are a fascist, and from the other perspective, you're a terrorist. And this is the language that's out there, and then it goes nowhere. And really, it's a difficult conversation because on the one hand, you're right. I did not build and labor, or my foreparents didn't labor to make this nation what it is, so that we can now freely lose it to migrants. This is one side of the conversation. The other side of the conversation is you accelerating to where you are, as for example Norway or Belgium, is on the
Hmm.
back of what you did to us, so in the south.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then you don't
For
have the
like,
rights to
yeah.
that life that you have in Belgium today, right? That is not a right, that is an oppression. So how do you debate that,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's why I said it's a dangerous thing, because I think in the desperation that we live in right now, it's a lot harder to manage these assimilations unless you are in the country club region of Copenhagen, where
Yeah.
everybody's wealthy and everybody's great, and we can have
Yeah.
beautiful assimilations,
But I
because we'll
mean,
talk
yeah.
about this over
Yeah.
turkey dinner, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, so and in Copenhagen, Denmark as well is still a fairly homogenous population overall.
Mhm.
Um and definitely Copenhagen, there have been people who've been super worried about, right, particular neighborhoods. It's usually been particular neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods are the way they are because, people come in as refugees or very poor migrants, and that's where the social housing is. So they all get placed together, and then somebody in politics gets really upset because these neighborhoods are majority non-white, um, because a lot of people came in and they were all placed here together by someone else, by the government,
Mhm.
right? So it's this circular, um, kind of hypocritical thing, right? Where people are getting super upset and worried that this assimilation will not happen. Um, but in a lot of ways, you know, I think assimilation happens very naturally if you leave it alone in a lot of spaces, right? So, for example, right, in Copenhagen, if you have a lot of refugees coming in from Africa and the Middle East, um, their kids are going to Danish schools, so they're going to learn the language and they're going to learn history the way it is taught in Danish schools, and mathematics and all of these things. And so, I think what, yeah, I think what I'm trying to say is there are good things about assimilation, like you get a lot of people coming together, mixing together.
Mhm.
I think in the end, the culture, like there's going to be a culture that develops from a mix of people. Um, having required assimilation doesn't really work
Hmm.
from what I have observed, right? And I know that in Denmark they kind of try to do a little bit of that in the cities as well in certain neighborhoods, but also being able to, for example, have a group, right, that has a particular set of values, and to say like this is what we will do to maintain our community also in times of adversity, with our values, can create a framework, right, to help. Does that make any sense? Like
Yes,
it can
but
create a
also,
framework to come
yes,
through, right? And it
yes,
doesn't, like my neighborhood group doesn't need to have the same rules as your neighborhood group,
right. That's fine.
right?
But the problem is my neighborhood group and your neighborhood group still have to send their kids to the same schools.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with the advancement of technology today is that we're starting to see a reality of the education as opposed to, like what you said, they learn the history the way they teach it in Danish schools. This was true, before the 1990s, because it would be really difficult for me to move to Denmark from Syria, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
put my kid in school and tell them, no, 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 this isn't the right history, because there is no access to truth. There is only access to what the books say and who has written the history, right? But
Yeah.
today, there is access to truth in a sense, and there is access to various modes of the truth. So, my truth, your truth, that person's truth in Syria who wrote a history of what happened to that history. That being the case, most people want to preserve the truth that they believe in, their version of the truth. And so
Yeah.
when you send the kid to school, you see this a lot in the United States. There's a huge, battle going on between many parents and the school systems and districts. And the reason is this wasn't, or this isn't the history that I know of, or that I can prove is different. And you've changed the history to teach a certain political side of
Yeah.
it. And so now people are coming out with a lot of proof and a lot of education because of our tech advancements. And so it's actually separating and segregating more because people are willing to, die on that hill of that truth that they believe in. And so the communities build not by coming together in these, kind of geographic groups and saying, we live in this district, we're all going to get along and find some way to be happy together. But they're starting to come together in these online or belief system groups that basically say, I believe in this kind of way of living, whether it's extremist or
Yeah.
not or whatever. And so they're coming together there, and as these groups grow, they become powers. And as we saw in France, for example,
Yeah.
the right was going to win by landslide if everybody else didn't come together and defeat them by
Yeah.
this much, right? Like the
Yeah.
whole country
That's
came
insane.
together and they were this much further from
Yeah.
losing everything. So
Yeah.
that tells you something about the culture of the nation at that point, given that the nation has a huge minority, population as well, a voting minority population. Given all of that, the right was still way ahead of everybody else, which I think one or two more elections, how are you going to fight that,
They'll come
right?
over. Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is, theoretically, like you said in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
theoretically, yes, it sounds really good that we can do things on a smaller scale, on a personal level, and everything else. But I think realistically, when we come out of academia and we stop talking about, oh, let's deconstruct this and let's understand that from this idea and let's have a round table and talk, it doesn't work anymore. In the real world, it's a jungle, and we need to take a little more of a global aggressive stance that brings the common into one place, and that one place is we need to survive
Yeah.
in a way that we need to also understand that the bee has to survive as well, because if the bee doesn't survive, we also don't survive. So it's not a
Yeah.
matter of let's see which tribe is the strongest, kill everybody and everything in existence and abuse, and then no, we will all go. So we have to find this harmonious place, but it has to be on a global level. And that's really been my quest for this whole time, that um, we need to come out of some of the things that neoliberalism has pushed upon us so that we can really find the angle of fixing and healing as opposed to being happy with the little steps we take
The little
on a
things.
daily basis. Yeah, the little things like, oh, I recycle now, I didn't. Okay, great, but it's not helping. To be very honest,
Yeah.
it's not. Unless the entire world follows this mechanism, it will not help a nation to follow it. That's really the gist of
Yeah.
it. And the problem is the nations that don't follow it are about half the population. You know, you take China, India, and the United States, and there goes half of the population that is massively consuming, right? And then you
Yeah.
say, oh, but in Africa, well, in Africa, you know, their overall emissions is negligible compared to you know, Europe and North America. So why are they in the conversation? The conversation should be
Yeah.
Europe and North America and China, right? I mean, even India is really low comparatively. So that's what I believe in.
Yeah. Well, but I also think, like being able to, like, one of the great things about globalization is that you can reach me on the other side of the
Uh-huh.
world, and
Hmm.
then I can reach people who might not be interested in, like, climate fiction at all. Like, I can reach my friends through speaking, and there are many different ways
Uh-huh.
to, like, bring these ideas around, both large and small.
Hmm.
And so that's I think that's like part of the greatness
Yes.
of the approach, right? Like, there are many drawbacks to how how this world has advanced,
Hmm.
but it's also very cool that we can even have this conversation, right? And then we can
Oh
take
yeah.
these concepts and, like, yeah, I'll reach people that you'll never know, and you'll reach
Right.
people that I will never know.
Right. And that's the beauty of you know, the advancements in the tech we have. But it is, again, going back to what you said, unfortunate how we've made use of them. So for example, you look at the internet, and you know, it's over 80% used for adult entertainment. Great, but that wasn't the purpose of the sharing of the information. You know, that should be a portion of
Yeah,
it, so people, you know, are free, they want to consume
can do
that,
what they
that's
like.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah, do what they like. You know, I'm not saying censorship and
within legal
dictatorship. Be
bounds.
free within
Yeah,
legal bounds, yes, within ethical and moral bounds, of course. But I'm saying let people do what they want. But then 80% is a high number, you know, or we
it
come up
is.
with
I didn't
some, you
realize
know,
it was so much.
chemical, yeah, and we come up with some, you know, chemical understanding and everything else, and then we purpose that to the atomic bomb. That's not a smart way to go. But like I said, you know, the capitalism dictates us to make use of things in the way that they do. The only way we're going to shift our lens is by shifting our systems understandings. And so, for as long as we have to live in a world that we have to earn and consume based on that earning, it just won't, you know. And you say this, actually, you know, you talk about rising seas and climate migration and all of those things, and you spoke about the massive Stormbreak Island, Copenhagen Stormbreak Island, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and you
Lynette
say the
home.
purpose, yes, and the purpose of that is to save the
Yeah,
rich, you know, and it devastates the Baltic ecosystem. um so, you know, these are contradictions we just spoke about, right? So
yeah,
you're never going to protect the whole if you stay in those systems. But those systems work because that, you know, is meant to protect the rich. It doesn't matter at the cost of the poor, because the poor don't matter. So so long as this is the thinking, those little pockets and communes and everything else are going to be powerful and forceful by the rich. You know, that's one example. I'll give you another example before I let you talk about that.
hmm
When the wildfires happened in Malibu, I knew people who lived there, and I said, "Oh my God, devastated! Oh, we're in New York. We're in our townhouse. We're gonna wait it out." Didn't affect them. That's
yeah,
why the story didn't really continue that much. It didn't affect it. There was, you know, there wasn't a large population of homeless people now and people struggling and high death rate or anything like that. Same thing happens in some, you know, poorer areas. Something similar happened in India, and there was, you know, one of the kind of their ghettos in that area, and you know, somewhere a fire started and it just caught on the whole place, and you know, dozens of people died and all of that, and those people are still in limbo because they can't go back to the fiery grounds and they don't know where else to go, and it's been months that it's going on. So very different scenarios. You know, one person can say, oh, I'll wait for insurance to tell me what the situation is, and then I'll call my architect and we'll see what new style home I'd like to build there in replacement. And then like,
Yeah.
oh, it's really hard because next year I have to make time for furniture shopping and all that. That's the conversation that happens in one wildfire. And in another wildfire, you're remembering a few months later your child and your dog and some of the members of your family who died. So, and you said this yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you
Yeah.
said
It
it's
is a
here to
total
save the
imbalance.
rich.
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
how do you fix
And
that?
yeah, how do you fix that? So for Lynetteholm, I don't know because it's been a very interesting process, right? So just to
Mhm.
recap for maybe people who aren't so familiar, Lynetteholm is an island that the Danish parliament decided to build. They had a vote on it and decided to build it. And it's going to be on sort of the outer part of Copenhagen's harbor, kind of across from Sweden. And it's supposed to, yeah, provide storm break capabilities for storms that are getting more fierce in the Baltic. And it's also supposed to provide about, I think, 25,000 or homes for about 25,000 people by the time it's finished being built. And they're going to connect it to the metro, right? There are going to be buses going out there and everything. So it's very much attached to the infrastructure of Copenhagen. Um, Most new apartments in Copenhagen are luxury apartments as well, right? Or fancy builds for rich people, which is its own kind of issue. And one of the things that happened when they were building Lynetteholm was that they did mess with the Baltic ecosystem. So they were digging, right, or they were filling in land for the island, and the Baltic Sea is fed salt water from the Atlantic by these three undersea trenches, and one of them cuts through Denmark, and they cut off that trench by accident when they were building the island, putting it together. So now less salt water is coming into the Baltic, which is how it will devastate the region, right? Because the plants and fish that have adapted to the specific saline levels of the Baltic, over time they'll get less. And that is something I found really interesting because a lot of Danes don't want Lynetteholm. The island could be reduced by about a third and the trench would flow again, right? So it wouldn't destroy the Baltic, but Parliament has not made any move to adjust that or try and fix the problem. They got a few scientists to say that they couldn't see any major difference between the saline levels, which made a lot of other scientists really angry because, of course, we won't see that for another 100 years. And by the time the effects are obvious, it's going to be too late, right? And even though it's a very unpopular motion with most people in Denmark, it has not stopped the Danish government from doing it, right? And it's like 13, 14 countries that are neighbors of the Baltic. So it's really going to mess with other countries as well.
Mhm.
But I don't hear a lot of other countries getting mad about it. They may not be totally aware of it, right? A lot of them are EU countries, but they don't have like, they're not bringing it up. I don't know that they're confronting Copenhagen about it or
Mhm.
Denmark about it. And it is a massive contradiction. Lynetteholm was a story for me that is kind of on the negative side, right? Where a lot of people can be against a project, but it can go through anyway.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, I don't have a strong answer for that aside from continuing to like put pressure on the people who can take charge there in any way that we can. Like you can always write to, you can always advocate for it, right? How useful that is, depends on who's listening to you, right? If you write to the EU Commission or if you want to make a noise about it. But sometimes the alternative is you don't make noise and then no one hears you and nothing happens anyway. So sometimes you want to do something.
Yes, you're right, and I think um, I really believe it's a blend of things. I think when the in this case specifically, when the scientists come together and they really put out studies and reports showing that the few scientists that the government purchased for a hefty price to write whatever they wanted them to write are wrong, then that triggers the public. Now the public goes out in mass protest saying you cheated us. Now the government has to backtrack and say, okay, this isn't going to work. Let's see what we can do. We've already made billions. What's uh, tens of millions less? We're good. We're good at an exit
Yeah.
here. And then basically they stop, right? And they walk
Yeah.
away with the money that they made, and the wealthy are not pleased, but they're content, with what they
One
made.
hopes.
And right,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, greed is a problem, right? It's an addiction. So there's never
Yeah.
enough. But sometimes, if you're still smart enough and not at the ends of your addiction, you can still make that judgment of saying, I took enough, I'm going to walk away with this. And that's what really protests do. People come in and they protest, and you realize that you got caught red handed, but you can still walk away with what you have. Because the public is always that generous, and so you do. If you're smart enough, you
Yeah.
walk away with what you have. So in this case, I mean, that's what it is. The science needs to come through. The politics needs to support it. I mean, like you said, there's many groups in Denmark. I'm sure there are groups who are siding with the public and saying, yes, this is not a good idea.
Yeah. Loads.
Right,
Right.
rile up those
Yeah.
groups in parliament. And then aside from that, the people have to take action, right? The people have to, but I really think action has to be fed towards what really matters. So protests and placards and words and stuff, it doesn't work anymore today because there's no more shame left in the world. There used to be a time when you went in front of someone's home and you protested, or their office, they were so embarrassed that they would they would literally sometimes, unfortunately, which isn't right, but it was so stressful, they would commit suicide or have a heart attack. Seeing that kind of
Hmm.
a reaction, right? It happened. Now they look at it and they're just, okay, bring the car around the back. I'll exit the back
Yeah.
because just to avoid. There's no shame in the game anymore. So it's cutthroat capitalism stage. So at this point, those kind of protests don't work. But what does work is allow your money to protest for you, because at the end of the game, it's all about the money. It's a money worshipping
Yeah.
world. So
Yeah.
if you control the money or you direct the money, everything changes, right? So that's what I tell people all the time. Protest with your money.
Yeah. I
Now,
like doing that.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
and
And yeah,
and I
we
want
have a
to
strong tradition of collective action in Denmark as well. And
yes,
so I hope that we can keep that going.
there is, and I hope so too. And again, a lot of times when people come together and they really commit, change happens. And I say change, not progress, because change happens. Hopefully, it's
Yeah.
progress, but change happens.
It's
There's
not
been a lot of
always. Yeah.
revolutions. Where I've traveled to a lot of countries after revolutions, and when they are talking about the ex leader who got killed, or they ran away or whatever, they say, bless him when he was ruling. And I say, what do you mean bless him? Like, oh, it was so much better than the current regime. So you get these conversations, but
Yeah.
hopefully now. You're an activist because I know you also have thoughts about the moving of the temple of Ramses II, and
Yeah.
the faraway stuff too. I mean, that's we're talking in Northern Africa, and then also the cultural destruction in Baghdad, which again is far away from
Yeah.
Copenhagen during the war. So these are both examples of how humanity erases history, or shifts it, like what we were saying earlier, right? In how it's taught in school. So why do you think cultural preservation is so critical to the morality that we've been talking about this whole time? I mean, this question should have preceded all of that, but why do you really think that it's so important?
Well, I mean, so first of all, I think that, so the interaction of ancient civilizations and just the development of ancient civilizations it affects all of us. I don't think it matters where you are in the world. Like, you've been affected by the ancient Mesopotamian civilizations, which came out of Iraq, right, and the area around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and the same with ancient Egypt. Like these ancient cultures have made such an impact on everything, right? And it's easier for us to think about like classical civilization or ancient civilizations in terms of Greek and Roman civilization. There's definitely like a Western, like white European aspect to that. And just the like shifting, destroying, and rewriting these ancient cultures it's just a terrible way to try
Yeah.
and it's usually a way to try and put forward a particular political system or belief system, and being able to understand the way history rolls and the turning of the wheel, as we like to bring up this idea that history is a wheel in the Hollow Age, being able to see how that turns and has turned in the past can be just so important and relevant, right, to people who are trying to understand where we're going next. And I think particularly in the sense of like places in Baghdad, which we'll never be able to get them back. Like the things we've lost from the war in Iraq and the way it destroyed a lot of ancient sites. There's no way of knowing how devastating that has been. And the more we dig around and sort of examine ancient cultures, the more we find that sort of tells us why things are the way they are, like from why the Bible was written the way it was with certain stories to things like why we have 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour. Right. It goes all over the place. And you have things like that. And you also have things like the moving of the Temple of Ramses II, which happened in the 60s when Egypt was still a colony of the British Empire. They decided to erect the Aswan Dam as an irrigation project. And the Temple of Ramses II was going to be at the bottom of the dam. And so they worked with archaeologists to move the whole site. They put in the Aswan Dam. It's, for me, kind of a double whammy in that, there was probably a lot more down there that never got excavated and we'll never know about, because a lot of these ancient Egyptian sites had workers' villages around them. And you could learn not just about the king and all of his building projects, but about the life of a slightly more common man who was working on the building projects. All of that is gone. But also, of course, like afterwards, it was kind of discovered that the way the Nile had been running for thousands of years was actually very clever. And, there were like a lot of issues sprang up out of trying to tame the Nile. And I don't think the project went as well as maybe leaving it alone would have done, which I think is kind of it works on both levels in comparison to the Hollow Age.
Now, sticking, with the thought of that, in the novel, you bring in, monoculture farming, corporate agriculture, and, the destruction of biodiversity, and how through all of this, it's deepening hunger. And going to the philosophical side of the novel, these issues are thrown in. So how do we approach agriculture in a way that restores the balance instead of how we're eroding it? One thing, obviously, is it hinges again on the capitalistic approach of farming and agriculture, as opposed to a sufficiency or a historical understanding of food, which is food is meant to keep you alive, and it wasn't a matter of, just like all other species in the world. I mean, it's great that we have this advancement and we can have different types of foods and we can experience different cultural foods and different places and everything else, but is it better to do it at the cost of food itself and at the cost of our health and at the cost of the capitalism that goes with it? I mean, today restaurants vie for sales and not really for the art. I mean, it's about getting your Michelin star or this or that or a review here or something there. So, or which celebrity came into your restaurant or how packed you can get. And so there's all these ways that we're looking at food, but we're not looking at food as the main stay of our relationship with the earth and how we stay alive. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, so I think I am in no way qualified to solve the world's agricultural problems. One thing that I've sort of seen here, right, is there's tons of homogenization of food, which can be a bad thing, right? In a lot of ways, it's a bad thing. Now, there are some things in Denmark that it's totally impractical to have, like fresh tomatoes, right? You can grow them in a greenhouse. They're going to taste bad. They don't grow naturally here very well. We don't have the climate for it. I'm all for canned tomatoes from Italy, right, instead. But on the other hand, for example, we have like 160 different types of apple that grow in Denmark, right? Apples grow beautifully here, naturally. If you go to the grocery store, you will find 2 different types you can buy, and they're both from Italy as well. I don't think that's relevant, right? Why should we be importing Italian apples when, we have apple trees in almost everyone's backyard?
So wait, why?
Tell me why.
Why is this happening?
I think it's because, I buy a type of apple, like a pink lady that's really big here right now. And I say, oh yeah, that apple is nice and crisp. It's the right blend of sweet and sour. That's the apple I want. And then I'm going to go look for that apple. Then the grocery store is going to provide me with that apple, even though it doesn't grow very well here. And like unless I'm going to a market where the draw is that I can find something unusual. What the grocery store really wants is that I can always go and find exactly what I'm looking for, right? And that's how chain groceries, get and keep their customer base, right? And
habit building. It's kind of
exactly.
a habit building, and it's not really what you want. It's for you to recognize that the apple at the store that is always there. There is that security of knowing it's always there, that you can always buy it. But it's not really about I have the variety of 160 apples there. Whereas the farmer's market gives you that kind of variety that becomes exotic, even though it's from your own backyard. That becomes exotic. And the stuff that comes from Italy becomes the norm.
The norm, yes. And the farmers markets here are very much based off of, you want to go and try something new. You're experimental and interested in things. One thing that they are doing that is cool is they're looking at, different ways to use Danish produce in a way that's going to be delicious. And so Ingrid peas, I'm not sure if that's their name outside of Denmark, but it's a type of pea that has traditionally been used as animal feed, right? And so these did not exist in my mind when I came to Denmark 15 years ago. It was stuff you fed to cows, right, and pigs, that and yellow lentils. And one cool thing that people are doing that I think we should do more is that they're taking these Ingrid peas and they're doing different things with them. So they taste a little bit like chickpeas, right? So people are making hummus with them or falafel.
Right.
And they're going to say, it doesn't taste exactly like the hummus and the falafel that you will get if you go to the Middle East, right? But it's Danish hummus and falafel. Right. We have a canteen near our apartment that makes like tofu out of it. It doesn't taste anything like tofu, but it has like that consistency, right? And they'll make, they'll make sort of Asian profile style dishes.
Mhm.
And they'll use Ingrid peas that grow here instead of soy that grows somewhere else. And I think that's a very cool way that chefs have been experimenting with, like, both the fact that Danish people, I think in particular, kind of think their food is pretty boring. So they like to experiment with other food traditions. But a lot of chefs are bringing it back to some of the stuff that grows here naturally. And I think
Mhm.
I don't know that that's the answer, but I think it's been a very cool answer for what we can do.
Right. I definitely agree with you there. Returning to the local agriculture, and part of it is not just the farmer issue. It's part of it is the conglomerates, the large chains. Like when you look at Lidl and Carrefour and these big Walmart, they can't afford the issues that happen naturally in the agriculture world because they have shelves to fill, right? And they need
Yeah.
those shelves to be full and to be sold and to be standardized in some way. So they really can't sit there and say, oh, this year's yield wasn't the same, so a quarter of the shelf will be empty. But that's okay because we're championing the right kind of agriculture. No,
Yeah.
how do we fix this? How much money do I need to throw at this to fix it? Doesn't matter how, what chemicals, what's going on, where in the world I have to bring my tomatoes in from. Let's fix
Yeah.
it, right? So, yeah, that's part of the issue. But you're absolutely right. I think this comes down to re-educating the public and to diverting the public to the kind of education that allows them to understand what foods they need locally as well. Because I remember many years ago when I didn't even care. I had, decades ago when I had absolutely not a care in the world about anything or an understanding. I remember being in New York and it was in the middle of winter and I was at a restaurant and one of the more expensive salads they had was watermelon and goat cheese. And
Hmm.
I thought to myself, wait, we're in the middle of winter. Like I have that
Yeah.
when I go to like Greece or somewhere in the
Yeah.
summer, that's the kind of salad you have in the summer by the beach or something. Why is this here and why is it so expensive, right? It
Yeah.
should be more like, heartier, like a cold weather kind of salad or something. And that stuck with me. And decades later, now I understand. It's because you go somewhere nice and you order a nice dish and it's a pricier dish and you enjoy more because you paid more for it. So subconsciously it's
Yeah.
like, a yummier dish or something. And you're not thinking that watermelon is not for the winter. Where's my,
Yeah.
uh, winter foods and stuff. And so you start distancing from understanding your agriculture. Like many children, even my generation, grew up in concrete jungles. So you don't
Hmm.
understand. You don't have an understanding for um, anything agriculture. So the
No.
education,
Yeah.
is where it's at. And you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. When you start educating people into this understanding, um, that's where the shifts start to happen. Because if everybody in Copenhagen knows that there are over 100 types of apples that grow in Denmark and they can't find one, then everybody starts saying, "Where are our apples?" Right? It becomes an issue. Where are they going?
Yeah.
Even right? Like
Yeah.
who's taking them? Where is it getting exported? We're
Yeah.
not seeing any. Like we
Most of them
want to
are just
know.
rotting on the ground. That's what's horrible
Well,
about
there
it,
you
right? Or
go.
they're providing fruit for the birds or something like that.
Mm,
So we might get a little visitor here in a minute. Uh,
no problem. We're all for more people on the podcast.
well, this is a cat. So,
Okay, the cats are welcome. Cats are lives. All lives are
yeah,
welcome. Doesn't
yeah,
matter. They could be animal, they could
but
be alien.
yeah,
We take all lives.
that is good. But that's
Yes.
often what I think about when I think of, like, yeah, getting together locally, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think a lot of local initiatives do to think about things like local food or local flowers, right? If we want to attract
Yes.
bees and butterflies. Um, and so that's often at the top of my mind when I'm thinking about, yeah, what are we doing as a local community?
now you've got us all distracted because I think myself and everybody here watching are waiting for
Mm-hmm.
the cat to
Oh, the
make an
cat. Yeah, sorry,
appearance.
she settled
Yes,
down. Let me see if I can
and if
shift
she's
here.
right,
This is,
and if she doesn't make an appearance, then
there you are. There's
oh,
little Snow.
hello. Ooh, nice
Mm,
eyes.
yeah. We adopted her
Okay.
from some friends after she didn't get along with her sister cat.
Oh no.
So now
Okay.
she's with us.
Okay. That's nice. At least she got her way.
She did. She gets away in everything.
Well, you knew you were going to get somebody like that. So
Yeah.
now let me ask you from an artistic standpoint, The Hollow Age explores the boundary between storytelling and activism, which is really where we spent most of our time talking. Most of the development of the book was the same things we're talking about here right now. It was activism and the way we see things and all. How do you see art and fiction specifically? Because, that's your forte
Yeah.
serving as a catalyst for systemic and spiritual awakening, because you said earlier, you touched on it, you said, by putting the issues that people face in the characters, we're kind of allowing them to see it as a mirror. So how do you think that we can ignite
Yeah.
through fiction?
Yeah. Good question. I don't know if I know the answer, but I've thought about it. So, like, I think one big thing is that people want to see themselves mirrored in fiction. I
Hmm.
think a lot of people don't necessarily want to see themselves mirrored exactly the way they are, which is often maybe uncertain, or in the case of something like this, a bit lazy about, buying consciously or being conscious about things, or maybe somebody's on the fence about whether they, how to get involved in activism. And I think modeling that is an opportunity, right? Having people or characters that people enjoy reading about who do the right thing, whatever
Mm.
someone might think the right thing is, whether it's, helping a stranger on the side of the road, or, making a big grand gesture, or just going to a protest as like a first step. Um, Being able to relate to that is important, right? And it's been sort of shown that kids, especially, right, they want to see people who they can model themselves on, right? And
Hmm.
so characters can be that. I also think that all art is political, including fiction, right? Everybody who
Hmm.
writes something, we have our own standpoints, right, and theories on how it should be. And so, um, being able to put that out there is its own political statement, and hopefully, like, people can read something about um, an activist in fiction and maybe get together with other people to talk about it, right? Or find a book on anything to do with what we've talked about on climate change or on small farming, local farming, and start there.
Hmm.
Like, I think the beauty of it is that there's so many options depending on what you're ready to do.
And writing as one of the arts is an expression, and it's really taking your thoughts and giving it to the next person and waiting for a response, essentially. And that's what happens with the purchase of the book, right? A person reads a book, and I really wish we do this more often, which used to be hundreds of years ago. You wrote a book, you put it out there, people read it, they would respond in a book to your book, and there would
Yeah.
be philosophical dialogues that way. And I'm not asking for that, but just like with social media, I mean, that's what's today, at the pace that we're moving today. The one philosophical book responding to the other philosophical book has become, kind of content. Dostoevsky's arguments have become narrowed into comment on social media feed from a post. But the post is a form of expression. It's like you said, it's political because there's a flow of energy through this post that I'm saying something. And now somebody comments, it's a reverse of that, saying yes or no, or I agree, or let's, whatever it is, take it from there. So
Yeah.
I You're right. I mean, it's that is what it's about. It's about using art to, and every change, every progress, every breakthrough, every revolution, it all starts with art, and it all starts with just the imagination of it, and then putting that imagination into some kind of art and some kind of expression. Last question for you, Claire.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an interesting one. I ask everybody, and I get very varied responses, which is pretty cool. So let's imagine you're the most powerful person on earth, absolutely the most powerful, but not in like your fictional, Darth Vader type of thing, but in moral influence, right? You're the most powerful person in moral influence. What is the first action you take to ignite a global shift toward planetary harmony, toward everything we're talking about? And you can't say act locally because we argued about that. So think
No,
of something
yeah.
else.
No, I had some thoughts about that, and I think if I could reach everyone in the world,
Mhm.
I think I would try, like, if I could reach everyone in the world and make them do it long
Mhm.
term, I would say, like, think about other people, right? And what are your actions, what do your actions do to and for other people? I thought about trying to get, some of the rich people to end world hunger. That's a great concrete sort of solution. But I also think long term, right? What if you end world hunger now and then you don't end any of the symptoms surrounding it? So it's just going to come back in the end, probably.
Mhm.
Um, so I think something about that, like, think about other people when you are acting in the world, and not just the people who are sitting right next to you, right, or
Mhm.
in the apartment next door. Thinking about, kind of like what we said with buying online and things, like, think about who's making, who's making your, the shirt you just bought. And if that shirt company is local, or like, ethical, like, who's making the cloth that they're buying, and who's dyeing it
Mhm.
and printing it, right? Um, if I could get everyone to listen to me about that, I feel like that might go a long way towards solving some of these problems.
So basically, you're saying you would activate Compassiviste, because Compassiviste is essentially the mindset of thinking compassionately and acting on it in an action that drives to harmony. So
Yeah.
be compassionate, act on that compassion, leading your actions, and the world will become a better place.
And
Beautifully
yes, I
said.
highly believe that.
Well, you highly believe in Compassiviste. Welcome.
I do. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. To the audience, stay tuned to the end to hear a sample of our book, The Hollow Age, narrated by Bobby Gentili, available now on Amazon, Audible, iTunes, and other digital platforms. Thank you, Claire Bartlett, for speaking on
Thank
Compassivist
you.
Dialogues and for helping bring the Hollow Age to life. That's the most important part of this. Our collaboration stands as a reminder that art and activism can unite to reveal truth, challenge illusion, and inspire transformation. That's the Compassivist model. That courage to write about both despair and hope is what, in your answer to that question of the most powerful person on earth, is what makes you a natural Compassivist. And what I'm finding, of the hundreds of episodes we've had at Compassivist Dialogues, most people are responding with a Compassivist mindset, essentially, going there. So it's really powering to get that feeling, and get to see people are on the right page, all waiting for a platform, a gathering, an ignition to really start making that change. To our audience, please subscribe to Compassivist Dialogues, share this episode so that you and everybody else can hear more about Claire and her other books and her writing and the fabulous work that she does, and support her in her activism so she can bring more apples and more variety to Danish
Yes.
supermarkets and grocery stores. And explore the links below for The Hollow Age, Again, Claire Bartlett, Compassiviste Publishing, and Compassiviste as a whole. Follow us on our social media so I can bring you more really cool people like Claire and have discussions like we did. We're here to help change the world together. I'm Ali Horiat.
Chapter 1, 4 in the morning, and the fine particles drifting outside the third-floor windows already screamed bad air day. In the orange haze that heralded a modern sunrise in Bologna, buildings loomed like the vast pylons of an ancient temple. Long shadows stretched across the road, so thick and choked with smog that they looked like they could be touched. As the sun rose, they might lighten, but these days the shadows never really went away. And being out in the Italian air in August for more than 30 minutes came with bigger consequences than a bad sunburn. But hey, at some point, everyone had to answer the great philosophical question: what would you put your life on the line for? Apparently, Olivia Tate would put her life on the line for archaeology. Apparently that wasn't enough anymore. Olivia ran her hand through her dark hair, still wet from a tepid 2-minute shower, and read the email again. The words chimed like bells in her mind, clanging louder and louder, hollowing it out until she couldn't think of anything else. Deepest regrets. We understand this is not ideal. Extreme circumstances, nothing we can do. Close the dig and return immediately. It was so absurd she wanted to laugh, except she knew if she laughed, she'd start crying next, and she was too practical for that. She'd secured emergency permission to start this dig. They were 3 weeks in and finding artifacts beyond their wildest dreams. And now she was supposed to walk away. She'd spent 10 years studying, teaching, publishing, and applying to excavate sites at high risk of destruction due to climate-driven emergencies. The whole point of her work was to beat the extreme circumstances, to use her knowledge to save some small part of this burning world. Now she knew the people in power were too cowardly to back her up. She tapped slim tan fingers on the table of her rented apartment, a mid-20th century studio with cement floors and cheap prefab furniture, all in the same 2 shades of lime and rust. The Formica-topped kitchenette held an electric kettle, an air fryer, and a mini-fridge, their stainless steel finish flaking in a manner that would concern her if she cared. Her breakfast waited in the fridge. Olivia was on her 2nd cup of tea, though it wasn't yet 5 a.m. She needed whatever caffeine she could get to face the smog and the heat and the sun. She took a bitter swallow from a cheap blue cup as she called her boss. Dr. Henry Mueller picked up immediately. It was nearing 10 p.m. in Maryland, but Mueller was infamous for working until midnight most days of the week. Olivia didn't let him say hello. What the hell? Olivia, I'm sorry. I did what I could, he said. I'm on a dig, Mueller. I have my work permit in my passport, and I'm just supposed to come home? Abandoning the dig would be a huge stain on her career, not to mention her 3 PhD students who'd have no project if they didn't finish. She lifted her cup with a shaking hand. Black tea sloshed over her thumb. The work permit's been revoked. Apparently there was a problem with the paperwork, and you were working illegally this whole time. Bullshit, he sighed. She could just imagine his longing look toward the pack of cigarettes on his desk, the way he puffed out his whiskery cheeks. Probably, yeah. It'll still take most of my clout to keep you from getting fired over this. You can take that clout and shove it. She stopped. Took a deep breath. She'd never been the calmest archaeologist around the staff table, but she was practical. She could keep her cool when she needed to, and now she needed to. Henry, This makes no sense. We've got private funding, the dig's in full swing. What does the Ministry of Culture want? A bribe? If you're going to offer it to them, do me a favor and get me in on the call. I'd love to hear their reaction. Mula paused. She knew he was reaching for a cigarette, and she knew the crinkle that came over the phone was from him shoving the pack away. He'd been working on quitting for 6 years. The Ministry of Culture says that in a crisis, all non-essential permits are suspended. They're saying you don't qualify. Essentially, the paperwork might have been approved, but it shouldn't have been. So it's being revoked. We're here because of the fire. The dig site was at the bottom of a reservoir that had been drained to fight the alpine wildfire blazing on the Swiss-Italian border. The reservoir was only empty because the people it served had been evacuated. When the fire was contained and everyone moved home, the dig site would be flooded again, its secrets lost forever.